Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started on the third podcast or the third webinar of our annuity series. Today, we're going to be talking about the 5 ways to help your clients make smarter annuity decisions. And I'm going to just go ahead and hand it off to the expert, Mr. Tom Marlowe.
All right, thanks, and welcome back. If you've joined me before from a previous discussion around renewals, analytics, budgets, and all that fun stuff in the IP world, if this is your first time joining us, thanks for joining us. Having spent time prosecuting patents, creating portfolios, managing portfolios in-house, I've really come to know the value and the importance of good, efficient decision-making through the patent process. And, well, annuities are no exception. So annuities themselves, they can be costly, I suppose, except when they're cheap. But as a whole, for a portfolio, they add up and quickly, especially if you run into grace periods or, God forbid, revivals, if you would need to go down that route. They can easily be an afterthought, especially after the hard-fought battle of getting to grant, slogging through prosecution. You come out on top, everyone cheers, you get a fancy certificate with a gold ribbon, life is good, and then, yeah, we still have to pay attention to this thing. Yeah, well, like it or not, these things are unrelenting. You pay 1 year and they come back for more, again and again and again, and that's how annuities work, even after you've worked so hard. I don't know who added this last bullet on the slide. Who doesn't get excited over the prospect of making a bunch of annuity decisions, all for the pleasure of, well, continuing to keep patents in your portfolio? Okay, I would never say that they're boring, but for some, maybe so. So here's an interesting data point that's, for what it's worth, on the topic of who cares about annuities. In a mature portfolio with some sort of international reach, it's not uncommon for annuities to make up easily 20 to 30% of an annual budget. This is a big deal for corporate folks because that's usually a single line item on the budget, and it easily attracts targets like flies to honey. So this is an area where when cuts come through, a lot of folks like to target. Most annuity providers, if you use one, aren't all that interested in helping make really good decisions. And by good decisions, I mean abandonments from time to time. And it's kind of because there's nothing for them to gain from an abandonment. And I realize I'm saying this as I stand here and I run an annuity service providing company. We try to be different, but I'm not going to go into that. I'm happy to do sales pitches any other time. But this very point is why you don't see too many annuity providers providing data or workflows to help make or drive abandonment decisions. The idea is to just pay everything because the fees are associated with what gets paid and processed. As an attorney, you can help your client, however. It's part of the job, right? If an abandonment is the right call, it's the right call. The key is providing good and easily digestible information that can be used as part of the decision-making process. By helping make annuity decisions informed and thought out, you're supporting the client to properly handle the financial realities that surround those assets. That's important, and good counsel, really. So let's take a look at some techniques that are helpful. And it all begins with an understanding of the client, setting the stage, really an understanding of how they operate. So this means talking about budget, not just application by application budget, that's easy, but the overall strategy. What's the plan? How does it fit with the business strategy? What's the annual budget for the year? How many filings do they want to shoot for? Talk technology roadmap and R&D investment. This is easy if it's a public company because some of those R&D numbers are going to be public anyway. Put together or encourage the client to put together a strategy to align filing, prosecution, and annuity costs to business in technology strategy. Simply, this means future, current, and old technology value aligning with the patent and application spend that's in the pipeline or coming down the pipeline. And a big piece here too is avoiding sunk cost bias. This is a big one. If you or the client can't get past sunk cost bias, it's not going to make any sense to spend any time analyzing annuity decisions. There's always sunk costs with this stuff. There's always some cost with this stuff, and it's seldom small. But you know what? Today, it doesn't matter what it cost you to get here. It doesn't matter what it's cost. It only matters what it will cost going forward. And if the value of the patent, keeping that alive, the annuity supports, the value of the patent supports that cost of the annuity. So if we can get past that, then we can look on to ways to make some good decisions. So the first is timing. Obviously, it's beneficial to avoid grace or surcharges, fees from paying annuities late. That's kind of a given, I would think. You can help your client out greatly by taking timing into account for the whole process workflow. We know that the bare minimum necessary is staying on top of the renewal deadline. You can't miss that. But that deadline doesn't take into account that the patent or patents with the upcoming annuities are not always top of mind, meaning it's likely been a while since someone's looked at them. In order to review those patents, well, not surprisingly, some time is going to be needed. So how does your client like to do their review? Do they have a process? Hopefully you get this information when you're setting the stage. If not, you can help them put together a workflow. Who are the stakeholders, who are the experts that should be involved, or whose input would really help make the decision easier? How much time is it going to take to get them into the loop? Some companies have the in-house department make all the decisions. Some review annuity decisions on a periodic basis when invention disclosures are being reviewed. It's a similar analysis and crowd, I suppose. Some have the product line make all the decisions, especially if they're the ones footing the bill. And others are, let's just say, more ad hoc. Understanding this process will help understand how much time is needed to make that decision. Once you know that, really setting the timing is simple. You start the conversation earlier and set artificial deadlines to keep the workflow moving on schedule. This is going to allow the client time to make good, informed decisions, stay out of grace periods, and really get the job done. So now that we have time taken care of, let's take a look at how to make the most of that time. Cost filtering is probably my favorite way to do this, my favorite way to slice and dice up annuity decisions, because it's the simplest. And the idea here is simple economics. Decision making takes time. Time is money. Below a certain cost threshold, it's just not worth taking the time to make a decision. The savings don't justify it, say if you decide to abandon. You don't want to spend $500 making a decision to save $300. It's just not a good move economically. So what you need to do is determine what that threshold needs to be and simply set aside those below for payment without a second thought. Save your time for the annuities where the economics justify the time to make the decision. So when presenting a client with reminders about a group of patent annuities to be paid, you just sort out based on cost and simply advise payment on those below that threshold. Maybe it's a few $100s as the threshold. I've seen companies who use committees to review annuities, similar to the invention disclosure review process. With invention disclosures, you can see the value. Patents have a prep and filing cost. They have prosecution costs, granted annuities, and then multiply that out by family members with foreign counterparts, and it's an investment and it's certainly worth review. With annuities, well, let's say you have 3 people reviewing a particular annuity decision for 20 minutes. That can easily equate to the equivalent cost of a few $100s. So unless you or the client have really nothing better to do, so the time value is pretty low, cost filtering is going to be an easy win. So you can phase this in too. Start low with, say, like a $300 threshold, and then move up $400 or $500 and find the sweet spot where time is balanced with the value of the decision. Well, so now that we have a set of annuity decisions worth spending the time to review further, let's take a look at how we want to do that review. So the next piece here that I like to look at is family data. Let's focus on pulling together some good data to help speed up the process, and family data is a great place to start. And it can serve multiple purposes as you go through your analysis. So the first purpose it serves is by taking a look at the simple composition and status of the family. How does the international coverage look? This is an indication of the applicability of the technology in global jurisdictions. Of course, assuming that thought went into the international filing decisions in the first place. Let's hope so. I know that's not always the case, but most of the time I would imagine. So you can use that to glean some sort of initial value. And then we can look at, say, continuations and divisionals, and whether there are family members still pending. So if there's family members still pending, you're still paying to grow the family, right? If this is the case, one would be probably hard pressed to abandon unless there was a problem with claim scope or something like that. But now we're talking about a much more in-depth analysis. So the idea here is getting some quick and easy data points that help us make the decision, is this worth looking at further or not, quickly. Additionally, is the family shrinking? So this is another way to take a look at the family data. We're going to take a look at what's gone on with family members. Have other members been abandoned in previous annuity cycles? This can be helpful. If they've been abandoned because a particular jurisdiction isn't that important anymore, okay, that's good to know. If they've been abandoned because the underlying technology isn't worth the cost of the annuity, that's pretty useful to know as well. Again, this data should be used to prioritize the review, focusing on those that are most worth reviewing, that have the highest potential for dropping, that is. And potential here is the key word. You're looking for potential. You're not looking for pure answers in the data. They let you focus on what to look at further. And the goal is to identify that potential. So here's how I would sort these. Matters with small families and abandoned family members, put those at the top of the list. Large distributed families, let's put those at the end. We're likely going to keep those around. So if there's not time to make a decision, just advise to keep them. Next is citation data. We're talking, when we say citations, we're talking forward and backward citations. That means what was cited during prosecution of your patent. Those are backward citations. And where did your patent get cited in the prosecution of another patent? So those are forward citations. These are oftentimes used, I know, in automated like value ratings, and they sometimes catch a bad rap for how much they are leaned on for that type of analysis. And I'll agree their value is, in that respect, is debatable, at least. So let's not talk about dropping these into any kind of evaluation rating. We'll just use them for what they are, an indication that someone is protecting similar technology to yours. Well, probably, at least. This is an exact science for sure. So if we recognize that this is how we want to leverage our citation data, and let's go ahead and focus on forward citations for now, other patents referring to a matter which has an annuity due. And I say that because, backward citations can have value, sure, but it's somewhat limited. And frankly, most of the time it's you or the client that's submitted the backward citations anyway. So the fact that the client's technology relates in some way to someone else's technology, which was earlier filed, yeah, that could be relevant. Someone who's trying to protect some new technology that's referencing your patent, that's just going to be a lot more interesting. Patents that have a lot of these forward citations, yep, okay, great, that's interesting, maybe. Patents which have forward citations from other patents owned by competitors, now we're getting hotter. That's something, might want to look into more. Patents with multiple forward citations from specific competitors, yeah, that has potential to really be meaningful and interesting. If a competitor has a glut of filings and my patent keeps coming up during their prosecution, that may mean something, or not, but it has a greater potential than another patent which doesn't have that amount of forward citations. And it may mean that this patent is actually foundational to the competitor's technology, which is probably worth keeping around. Again, it's all about sorting these things based on likelihood to drop or abandon. If there's a high likelihood of keeping, look at it last. That means the most interesting, the patents with lots of citations from competitors. While you may want to queue these up for like an infringement analysis, now is not the time to spend the time. You want to prioritize these by the previous categories and then by least interesting citation profile first. The next piece that we're going to look at after all this work, which is ideally not really all that much because we're trying to be as efficient with time as we can. After all this work is completed and a decision is made, record the points that led to that decision. Was the patent determined to be related to a key product? Was the patent determined to be related to a competitor technology? Was this determined to be a future technology and part of a growing family? Was there concern about value in a particular jurisdiction? All of these things are valuable insights that will continue to provide value the next time this matter comes up for annuity. Or maybe when a family member has an annuity coming due, or when a pending family member hits a gating event that requires more spend. Maybe the analysis doesn't even have to happen again because you can leverage what you gleaned the first time. Maybe situations have changed, but at least then you or the client only have to focus on the delta, what's changed since then in order to make the next decision. And that helps speed up the process. Let's say I decide to pay a Korean annuity because a sensor product is used, that is protected, is used in mobile devices being sold to Samsung for the South Korean domestic market. Okay, next year, I can look at that note and make a decision really quickly, or simply check to make sure the data is still the same. Maybe I find out that the sensor's been replaced by a newer technology. You know how this smartphone technology moves, and it's no longer relevant. I may not abandon it outright, but at least I have a good data point and it saved me a lot of time in the analysis to be able to justify that analysis based on the cost of that annuity. So here's kind of the recap. Let me boil it down. At the top, we're going to set the stage. We're going to talk budget, priorities, key technologies, process, and workflow with the client. If they don't have these pieces figured out yet, help them put these things in place. Not only is it going to be good for making annuity decisions, but it's good for IP strategy in general. It's really going to make things from an annuity and from a prosecution perspective just go smoother. A good understanding of budget will help the client understand their choices and best match their IP strategy with their business strategy. Abandonments of patents related to old technology, which say don't protect future growth or value, opens up budget for new filings that do protect the future. So this might be a smart strategy for the client, but it also works out pretty well for the law firm too. Annuities themselves are mostly government fees. So if you take a look at that graph that I showed earlier, where let's say 25% of a IP budget is slated for annuities, that 25%, that chunk is mostly just fees that are going up to the government. On the other hand, new filings are mostly attorney fees. And I'm not trying to imply here that you want to advise clients to abandon a bunch of matters only to get them to file more. But we're talking about helping drive good strategic decisions rather than blind annuity payments. The fact is that if you do that, it's not only good counsel, but it's also, and secondarily, good business. So looking at the 5 items that we discussed today, the first thing after setting the stage is to determine a timing strategy. Getting decision making out in front of the deadline. This is really important because it gives you time to do the work. After that, it's all about shuffling data to drive good, informed, efficient decisions. Cost filtering allows you to focus the client on the items with the biggest economic impact and ignore the decision making on the ones that aren't worth the time. Just pay those. Then we sort by potential value, looking at families, small ones first, especially ones with abandonments in the family. Then we look at citations, low citation count first, especially those not cited by anyone you care about, like competitors. This sorting, prioritization, it puts the interesting stuff last, meaning you just keep those if you get tight on time and can't come up with a good reason not to. Keep is going to be the default for those guys. The uninteresting stuff is where you can spend a little more time trying to figure out if they're worth keeping. Finally, at the end of this analysis, record that work, or at least the outcome of it. It's going to have value and save more time next year. If you can do all this, clients are going to be on a great track for managing their portfolio, and they're going to have their trusted advisor to thank. So, as usual, and I have to put on my annuity provider hat here for a quick moment. If anyone wants to see a demo of the system that we have and can make available to law firms to help provide some of this data and help them help you assist clients, just put "I want a demo" into the chat box. We'll send you one of our cool, interesting bobbleheads that we have. We'll get that out to you, and we'll do a quick demo for you, see if it's something that you might find interesting. And while we're leaving that open, I'm going to open the floor to any questions that folks might have about any of what we just talked about. Okay, let's see. Okay, I see a question here. Won't citation data be biased towards older patents? Yeah, okay. Yeah, actually, that's a good question. And the answer is absolutely. Yeah, that's true. So the longer a patent has been alive, the higher the chance that it has had to be cited by another one. So kind of by definition, most older patents are going to have more citations than younger ones. Yeah, absolutely right. But remember that this is just data that's used to point you in a particular direction. So if you want to leverage the citation data even more than I discussed, you can arrange it by age and citation count. Think of like a 2x2 grid with age on one axis and citations on the other. The older ones with fewer citations, that quadrant, those are going to be less interesting, right? So you're going to want to look at those. The younger ones with many citations they're going to be more interesting. You're probably going to keep those. And then the other two quadrants will fit somewhere in the middle. That's kind of how you can use that data. But that's a really good point. Let me see. What percentage of patents should be abandoned each year, generally speaking? Well, yeah, I wish I could give a good answer for that, but it really depends far too much on the business of the client. Are they focused heavily on old line, like standard products, legacy products? In that case, say older patents, legacy patents are probably still very relevant, and you probably aren't going to abandon as much. If they're in a field with a really quick technology turns and improvements, that number is going to be higher, because new technology is going to surpass the old technology much quicker. There's going to be a lot of variables that come into play, and that makes it a little bit too difficult to give a general answer there. That's why it's so important, though, going back to setting the stage and really getting to know the client and their business strategy, so you can kind of get an idea. Once you do that, you might have an idea of, for that client in a given year, yeah, about X percentage is what gets abandoned. So that can help you set kind of a guideline, maybe not a goal, but a guideline for what is realistic. All right. I don't see any other questions. So with that, that'll end our webinar. Thanks everybody for joining us today, and look forward to seeing you in one of our future webinars.